Hi, my name is Nate Nestler, and welcome for another exciting edition of, in this case, MySql. This is for Hyperactive Studios, and let's get started. All right, so let's look at a bunch of these commands here. Get ready to go over. This is basically how to set up a database with MySQL database, and how to do the commands to interface with it, aka SQL. So what this does do is do some basic commands where you can take control over things and add things into the database, retrieve things from the database, information that is, back and forth, create information, delete it, destroy it, etc., etc. That's really pretty much what a database is all about. But there's some things we need to do for security purposes, as we don't want just anyone getting into this data, because if you have there could be sensitive information in a database like credit card numbers, things of that nature that you store, and it'd be bad if someone got a hold of all of that. So there's definitely some things you can do to help prevent that, and we're going to go over some of that, along with how to set up, do some of these commands just for getting in and accessing different aspects of MySQL. I'm not going to cover everything in MySQL in this one video. There's quite a bit actually in MySQL. But might cover some more of it in some more videos. So pretty cool, but this is more of an introduction to it here. So what we're just going to do is go over these main commands. All right. Okay. So one of the things you want to do is, now we've already installed it because that was done in a previous video when we set up, did our whole installation of our system. I went over all that install stuff already, so I'm not going back over that again. So I just went ahead and enlarged the terminal and another desktop here. And you do need to be running Linux to do this. I mean, you can do it in Windows, but run Linux. Oh my gosh, just run Linux. It's yeah, it's better set up for it. Anyways, MySQL. You could also run it on the Mac too. If I do, so in order to log into MySQL from the client, this would be the client machine right here with their terminal. And I generally do this through terminal. I know some people like to use a GUI and all that stuff, but since you're going to be coding with this stuff all the time, it's kind of a good idea just to learn commands, period. It's the same stuff you do when you code it. So doing it from the terminal is no big deal. You just kind of, it's the same stuff you do all the time. Matter of fact, if you're coding with this stuff, it'll help you remember the commands a lot easier if you type them in a lot. So there's some positive benefits to that. -u is going to be the username here. In this case, we're going to start with root. Okay, and then -p, and then -b. B gets rid of the beeps. So very cool because I hate hearing the beeps. Alright, so with that, go ahead and put in your password that you set up when you first installed. If you don't remember what that is, you can't get in. You'll have to reinstall. There's no way around it. Yeah, you're locked out. So that sucks. So yeah, if I type in show databases, semicolon, I can see the database is already there. And it does automatically set up some databases for you, just so you have something to work with or just test. Give you an idea of what you can do with this stuff or everything. You can of course delete all these. It's no problem. I'll go over that in a bit, but first things first, I just want to go and show you how to create a database. So let's create a database. So let's call it something like let's call it users. How about that? So let's go and call it users. I'm going to say create database. And some people like to do all their stuff all caps in here. I like to do mine all lowercase. That's personal preference. Alright, and so when I do this, I get back query OK, comma 1, row affected 0.00 seconds. That's how fast it executed. Database MySQL is really, really fast actually. It's a very good database. It goes to tier level 3, which is like the highest you can go. It's got a lot of bells and whistles that you would need in a major database system. And so it's probably one of the most popular databases out there because it's free, but it has a lot of the bells and whistles of your bigger major database systems. Not everything, but a lot. Let's put it that way. Usually a lot more than what most people need too, for that matter. So it's very, very powerful, and it's really, really good. So a lot of people just use it for almost everything that they do for database stuff. So but if you do need the extra power and whatnot, then check out Oracle and DB2. Those are really, really good databases. So they're the best, actually. Okay. So with that said, let's just go ahead. Now that we have this database created, we can go ahead here and say use, not user, but use. And we can use the database users like that. And you don't have to use semicolon, but I do. At the end of that, it's whatever. Rest of them ones you do, but on the case of use, you don't actually have to have a semicolon afterwards. And at this point, we actually are inside the database. We're using this database. If I say show tables, though, since we just created this database, there's going to be nothing there, and it's empty set. Now, I want to go over some of these commands and some of the stuff and break it down, and I'm going to show you how to write this stuff into a script to make your life easier. Why? Because, well, in script you can double check yourself. In this terminal here, when you write a command, it just does it, and if you do it wrong, it just doesn't wrong, and there's no undo on this thing. So once you issue a command, it's issued. That's it. You got to make sure you do it right. So it's very, very important. So we're going to go here to the text editor, and we're going to look at having some of these commands created ahead of time, so that way we're not trying to figure out did we make a typo. We're going to make sure we type it in correctly ahead of time. That's what I've done here. I don't want to make mistakes, so you're going to have to excuse me, but I've kind of typed everything in ahead of time. Although I do like to make my stuff lowercase here, so yeah, something like that. There we go. Awesome, awesome. Notice that my MySql commands.sql file here ends in a .sql. This is actually really important. It does need to end in a .sql. Several things. Ged's going to colorize it for us, but also this can be recognized by MySql, and we can actually use a command called source, and it'll do everything in this file. So this is really, really great, especially when you're doing with create tables here. Trying to type out these multi-line type setups. It really, quite frankly, sucks to try to type this in the actual command line terminal. Not only can you worry about typos, but it's just harder to type it in than it is to type it into a file like this. It's actually a lot easier because then you can format it, and it's a lot better. It's a whole lot better. So I just tend to put my stuff into a file and then source it now. Okay, so first off, I'm going to create a new user. So we got create user here. And then you put the user's name. In this case, I said Nate because that's me. And I put single quotes around each side of it. And then I put the @ symbol in between, and then single quotes. And then localhost points to ourself. It's the same thing as loopback, which would be 127.0.0.1. But if you're talking for IPv4, if you're talking about IPv6, it's : :1. But same thing. This every operating system has this, and it points back to yourself. So kind of important to know that. Actually, technically, every operation you do on a computer where you're dragging and drop, copying files and moving files is actually a network operation, and it networks with localhost, which is yourself, so it points back to yourself, and that's how you're able to move a file from one place on your computer to another place. And that's true on all the operating systems, but I'm not getting into that any deeper than that. Anyways, that's enough information on that. Identified by, and then this is going to be the password, so I just call it password in here. So I literally am going to type password for the password for Nate. But very cool. And in this case, we're saying what the user is on what system, on what computer, and what their password is, and semicolon. So that lets me create the user. So you do have to have a user before you can grant privileges for a user. So it's very, very important to have that. All right. Then we're going to say grant all, in this case, all privileges. Now we could grant only certain privileges. Let me give you an example of this. Over here, we can say grant, select, insert, update, delete, index, alter, create, drop. That would be a list of different ones we could do. You could also revoke them from particular users here. So you could say, I don't want this person to have alter, create, drop, delete capabilities. Or you could revoke all from certain users, where certain users aren't allowed to do squat on the certain table. So we say on, this would be what database we're talking about here, and then dot, and then what table it is. If I say star, I mean all the tables. If I were to say star.star, that'd be all the tables, all the databases. Well, all the databases, all the tables in that order, but you get the idea. And so that's kind of important. And Billy needs a semicolon. Otherwise, that ain't gonna work. All right, so come back over here to MySql commands.sql. So grant all here on space star, and then on the next line here to, in this case, Nate, identified by Nate here with grant option. All right. And so we get the ability to grant privileges to others. Then we're going to flush privileges. Now you're not going to put Nate. You're going to put your own name that you use for your user account here when you set up your computer. So you're going to use that one instead. Alright, so here, flush privileges. Flush privilege is really important because this refreshes the privileges for everybody, reloads them, so to speak, and then everybody has privileges. So after you make a bunch of changes like this with your grants and all that stuff, you must flush privileges afterwards because it updates it. Otherwise, you'll be like, why can't I get in? Or because the privileges weren't updated afterwards. So make sure you update your privileges after you're done creating them. Kind of important. Okay, so after that's done, we say create table here, test table. And it's going to create a table called test table. And we're going to open it, start it with the opening parentheses here. Then we're going to say auto ID. And the reason it's important because this makes it automatically generate numbers in our records. We have to have what's called primary key, which is the main field for every database table. And it must have unique identifier keys, aka it must have unique numbers, like it must have 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, 0, 4, etc. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, etc. But you can't have like 22, 22, 22, you know, for different sets of records there, where one record's number is 22 and then the next record's number is 22 and the next record's number is 22. You can't do that because you wouldn't be able to specify one record from the other. So they must be unique, so that way you can always tell one record from another. You should have an identifying code that lets you do it. So now technically you can do other things other than the numbers, but it's a bad idea. The reason why is because numbers are the fastest thing to compute. Numbers are extremely quick, so you want to use integers because they're going to be the fastest thing. You're going to make it unsigned because you're not going to do any negative numbers. You're going to start at like 0 or 1 and start counting up from there. It's going to be not null. And you're going to set it to where auto increments, so that way when you're coding, you don't have to deal with it. Or if you're doing administration, so that way it just automatically starts incrementing these numbers accordingly the way it should be. And it's just going to start increasing them. And this is going to be on the primary key. So you have to let it know that this is the primary key, and so you identify it as such. Alright, then do a comma here. And I'm just going to use varchars because this is a little bit more memory efficient than some other methods. But if I say varchar here for name, varchar 100, this sets that the upper limit of this, what could be put in there for a name is 100 characters. You can't have more than 100 characters in this aka field in our database table. And I'll show you that in just a second, what I mean by field. But essentially if we had going across what would be a row here, we'd have name, first off, we'd have our ID, which is auto ID here. And then after that, we'd have name, and then we'd have email. So going across, you know, be auto ID, name, email. So there we are. And our email here is varchar here, open parentheses, 100, close parentheses. Notice I do not have a comma at the end. If I do, it's an error. Don't do that. It will not work in SQL if you do that. So very, very important. And this is SQL specific to MySql. Most SQLs are very similar to each other, but they are not the same. If you go from one SQL database to another, you will note that the SQL actually changes. And so it is not a universal unified language where everything has the exact same syntax. That is not the case. It's very much like each other, but not the same. So this is specific to MySQL. Anyways, there's our varchar here, and it's 100 for our email field there. And then we're going to close it with a closing parentheses. We're going to put semicolon at the end because this is really technically all one line command. But it's nice to be able to type this over multiple lines because it's easy to read when you do that. Alright, I'm going to do a more advanced one here. I'm going to say create table, PHP session here, open parentheses, why PHP session? Because if I want to do session database instead of doing it in a file, this is how I do it. I have to create a special table just for it. In which case I'm going to store the session ID. It's going to be a varchar of 50. It's going to be not null. We're going to have a session variable. and it's going to be of type text for it. Okay, this means it could be of any length. Last accessed is important. This will be a decimal, and this is how we're going to set that up. And we're going to make it not null. Okay, comma. And then we have a primary key, so we're specifying that the session ID is going to be a primary key. So you don't have to do it all on one line, I just prefer to. And then we have our session underscore ID here set for that. And then key here, so that we know last underscore ACC is last accessed. And so we get another key there. And it'll be when it's last accessed. Closing parentheses, semicolon. And actually, you know what? I'm picky about this. I do not like doing that. There you go. Sorry, I'm old school on this. I like for my parentheses to be lined up. I do not like having one at the end because you're more liable to leave it off by mistake and miss it. Okay, so select star from table. This is going to select all the records from a database table, and we're actually going to go back and do these. So if you're like going, I can't remember this, don't worry. We'll do this interactively so you get a better idea of it. But select star from test table here where name equals and single quote student, close single quotes, semicolon. And this is going to select it only where the name is equal to student. So for our users, as far as that goes. Insert into test table here. Values, null, comma, student, here, comma, open close parentheses for nothing at the end for email, close parentheses, semicolon. Alright, and then that will insert into our table, test table, a new record. Null here goes for our auto incrementer. Again, we don't do anything, we just pass it null, so that it automatically creates the next record number. We don't have to worry about it, we don't have to think about it or anything, it just does it for us. We just send it null for it to do it. And then here we're setting the actual name, because remember we defined name right here, right? We pass null for this thing right here. And then down here we pass this nothing at all for the email. Now you could pass it something for the email, but I didn't. I didn't because I'm going to handle it here in the update record because I want to show you how that works. So then I can use an update command if I like. Come in here to my test table, set a value for the email field, and I'm going to assign it to student at localhost where the name field is equivalent to student. So everywhere there's a name called student, their email is going to be set to student at localhost, which is exactly what we want here. In this case, now we have, you know, all that stuff. Select star from test table, and this will show everything in our test table, in which point we'll see our student there and also their email updated. It's very, very cool. And we can also show databases and tables. So I'll tell you what, let's source this file and make it do everything in this file at once. And then we'll go back and I'll show you how to go back, and we'll do this by hand and it'll give you a better idea of it, and you just follow along. But I'm going to show you the power of writing up one of these files and why they're so awesome. Okay, so if I say source space, now, no, I'm already, okay, hold on a second, starting to think about it. First off, you need to be where that file is, okay? So if I'm in here, ls, I just say quit to get out of MySql. Now cd into, in this case, my scripts is where I have my file. So wherever you save that file at. And mine's going to be called commands.sql. So when I say MySql here, -u, and I'm going to say root space -p and -b. Alright. Put in my password. And I'm in. Alright, cool. Show databases. Make sure I still have it there. Yep, I do. Alright, use users. And I'll just prove the fact you don't have to put a semicolon there. Oh, I said users. That's why I was like, what? Oh, okay, yeah. No semicolon required for that command. Just to prove it. Alright. And just to prove it, there's no tables in this database right now. It is totally empty, but soon there will be. Source. Alright. MySql. Commands.sql. Boom. Done. Alright. You might be going, you gotta be kidding me. Nope, it's done. That was it. Check it out. We now have a record in here. It's going to be one record. Name is student. Email student at localhost. Also created a table, test table, and PHP session. If I say select star from test table, this will show me all the records in that table. In which case I got back the only record there was, student. But I could also add another one if I so desire. You can also see there's nothing in PHP session right now. So if I do a select on it for a PHP session, and this is not case sensitive, by the way. Of course, it is a problem if you mistype it by putting in too many whatever. PHP session. Oh, I didn't think it was case sensitive. Maybe the actual table is. Okay. The regular commands aren't. But table name might be. Yeah, it's empty set. Okay, yeah, so it is case sensitive for the name of the database table, but not for the SQL commands. So my mistake on that. Some clarity there. Alright, so very, very cool. And very, very powerful. Well, let's just start going through this. Now I can actually delete a whole table or the records in a table. So I can say delete star from, and then what table it is. For instance, I could say like test table. Did I mistype it? Probably did. Yep. Alright, let me show you. Here we got lots of commands here. We have drop tabling. We can drop them. We can delete. This star I keep thinking from SQL. For select, I mean, sorry. Yeah, so I don't have to say star there. Just say that right there. Works fine. Alright, so now if I do my select here, and you can use the up arrows like before. It works fine. Empty set, nothing at all. Alright, so there's an example of that. We can also turn around and drop a table too. So if I say drop, and I can say table, test. Actually, I don't think I think I do. Yeah, I do have to say it. So test table. Like that. And I can also drop PHP session, and it just won't exist afterwards. Alright, and now if I say show tables, nothing at all. Alright, cool. But say we want to create those tables again. Well, we can come back in here, and I'm just going to copy and paste again because I'm not typing that up. And bada bing, there it is. Do that. See, otherwise I'd have to hand type it like that. I don't want to do that. Now I have a test table. Prove it. Now there's my test table. If I want to recreate my PHP session table, just Control C to copy that. Come back in here and Control Shift and V to paste it. And there it is. Show tables, and I have PHP session and test table. They're both there. Very cool, and they now exist. But, you know, since we dropped those tables, test table has no contents in it. So if I say test table like this, star from test table, sorry. Empty set. Okay, cool. Alrighty, let me show you a bit more. So that's drop. We saw delete. We've seen select. We've seen create a database. We've seen a lot of them. We haven't done insert though. So here's our insert command. So we're going to insert into the table and certain values, null, student. Alright, let's do that real quick. So we're saying insert into a particular table, in this case test table, and we want to put the values for a particular record to be null, student, and blank. And that goes to match up with the different values in our table. So if I were to do that select statement again on the table, check it out. The first one here is null matches our auto ID. So when we pass it null, I'm going to have to figure out, hey, this is the first time a record is being put in, so it's going to start with 1. Right? In case of name, I said, oh, make that student, right? So check it out. Name now is student in our fields right here. And see how we're just kind of corresponding with the data, matching the fields. And then for email, I want it to be blank. I want nothing at all in here. And so I got a blank email. But I probably want to do an update. Alright? So I'm going to do this one here. I'll explain it. Second. Cool. Alright. Run this here, and we can see the update. Alright. I want to prove that it works and then step you through it. We're going to use the command update. We're going to tell it what table we're going to update, and then we're going to set a particular field of that table. In this case, we said email. So we're going to set the email field. We're going to set it equal to student at localhost. And so if we stopped right there and said semicolon, this would literally change all the records in the database to student at localhost for the email. And it would wipe out everyone's emails, and no, you could not get it back. It'd be gone. So it's really important. Then you would say where afterwards name equals and then student here semicolon. So that way you're only targeting the name where student matches it, so that you assign and update that one particular value. Now you might be going, well, wait a minute, what if the name is the same name in a couple different records? Wouldn't that change the email on all those different records to student at localhost? And your answer is yes, it would. It absolutely would. You might go, well, how am I going to target just a particular record? That's why we did our auto ID earlier. So it's a unique field, and that's why our record here is called auto ID. So that way we knew. Some people will refer to it as just ID, and so instead of calling it auto ID, they call it ID for the record name. But I call mine auto ID, so I know that this is an auto incrementing ID. I just like to do that. That's my own personal preference for naming of that field. But anyhow, that is why we have an auto ID primary key, so that every single record in a database has a unique identifier for it, where we can identify this is this record and there's no other record like it. We can specify that particular record. And so the ID is great, and since we make it integer, it's super fast. Yes, you can make the primary key a string. This is a bad idea. It takes forever to check that and analyze that. You have to realize 1 byte is all you need for an integer, whereas you need lots. You need a byte for every single character that makes up a string. So that makes it super, super ridiculously slow to look data up or whatever. So don't ever do that, please. Yes, it's possible. I don't think they should allow it, but it is possible to do that, and it's a really bad idea. Not kind of a bad idea, it's a really bad idea. But there we are, and there's that. So we learned how to delete records. We learned how to delete, how to insert records, how to update records. Now you might be going, well, we learned how to delete all the records in the database table. And that's true, we did. That is exactly what we did when we did our delete command here. So when you said delete here from test table, this actually deletes all the records from that table. But if I were to say where here instead, for instance, name equals, in quotes, student, this would only delete the record that involves student. And so now we have an empty set. Okay, I'll get it back real quick. Bam, now we got it again. And now there's our record student, and it's now auto ID 2. Now we're going, well, it's the only record in the field. Why isn't it 1 again? Nope, once it starts counting up, it just keeps counting. If you delete that record, blah, 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 it's gone. And so you get a gap in the records for the numbers. So numbers aren't necessarily always consecutive. Pow, 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 pow. It starts counting up for the next number thereafter. It doesn't fill in between. So FYI, that is the case. Alright, so that goes over how to create database tables, how to create databases, how to create user permissions, how to deny users, how to create users, how to flush them. Oh yeah, let me show you how. Now that we actually did that whole create the user and grant them privileges and everything, this is really cool. Now I can quit, for instance, here. And check this out. When I say MySql, let's say -u, I don't have to say root. Don't want to do root because root has command over everything. You want to only have the person having privileges for that particular database and nothing more. Why? Because it's more secure to do that. Alright, and then now it's going to be the password for Nate and not for root. It's a totally different password, matter of fact. And so now I am allowed to, I can say show databases. And I don't have access to everything. See all the databases I don't have access to? Check it out. I can't see them even. Won't list them. It won't. I'm not allowed to access them. Alright, so if I use users and switch into that, alright, and I'm now in that database, and I can now show the tables, and now have access to this. I can now do a select on this, select star from, oh man, star from test table, for instance. Alright, cool. I could also do where name is equal to, and say student here. This only targets the student one. There we go. We see the same result. You might be going, well, how is that any different? Well, okay, so what if I did another one here? What if Bob was joining us now, and then I wanted to update him. So such a nice guy, and I really want to be Bob at localhost. Okay. If I do this listing now, dude. Oh, I forgot to put Bob here for this. Oh my goodness. Alright, now it's Bob at localhost for both of them. See, that's what happens when you make a mistake. There's no undo, so I have to recreate. Yeah, I just have to redo that now. So for student, I want that to be student. Like that. Wow. Yeah, there we go. That's more like it. Now if I want to do a query where only I want to see name is equal to, in quotes, student here, for student, I only see them and won't see Bob on the listing. I can change it over. Maybe I only want to see Bob now, right? I can do that right there. And now I only have Bob. So, very, very cool. Lets me interactively switch back and forth and everything on this stuff. And let's do all these different commands and everything as far as that goes. So this is base core, basically how you go about setting up and creating a database, how you insert and add information into it. I'll go over another video later on here for how to do more with MySQL, but this right here will get your feet wet. This will get you set up with the proper security, everything on it, and get you going. One other thing I want to talk about though real quick, and I think I threw it over in my commands down here. Okay. Now, if you're doing a root password, maybe you're not dealing with, it starts out blank, okay? And you may not be able to log in. You're just going to go, no, why can't I log in? It's because you literally don't have a password for the root user. In order to set that password up, you have to run MySQL _secure installation. Now, on the case of Ubuntu, this did it up front when we did installation. Now, on some other installations and some other Linux distributions, that's not the case. And so you will literally have to come in here and set this up yourself by hand. And it's actually kind of, I found it really difficult to find this in the documentation back when I first had to do this. And this is the magical command that you need to know. So you absolutely want to run this command in order to set up your root password. Otherwise, you won't be able to. And then afterwards, of course, you can just do the regular login that we've been doing. Here's another example here for the -h right here, and then you can specify a different server. So say you're on your MySQL servers on a totally different computer elsewhere, you will use the -h option, the -h option, and the name of the computer. This could be the IP address. This could be like www.example.com, for instance, whatever you want as far as that goes. And that will let you basically set up to log in on a whole nother computer completely way off elsewhere, um, and get into the database structure. So, of course, if you're a smart network admin, you're going to lock down the IP address only to certain computers being allowed to even log in, period. And so this prevents external attack when you do that with maybe like TCP wrappers or something like that with host.allow and host.deny, something of that nature. And it's a good way of locking it down. One of the ways of locking it down. There's several, and I recommend you use more than one. But yeah, so that's one way of securing it more. Okay, and earlier we learned about how to encrypt stuff with SHA-1 and MD5, etc. And then we could just pass that data into the database here, store it for the password, and it'd be stored as encrypted inside the database. And in our code, we just take a regular password and convert it to being encrypted and do the comparison check. So if the two match, we're good to go. Okay, but with that, that covers how we can set up doing some database development here with this. And I think I pretty much went over how to do this whole thing. We're revoking certain privileges where these particular people are not allowed to do anything on this particular database for all these tables, right? If I want to do it for all tables everywhere, period, I wouldn't say users here. Instead, I would do star.star, and they wouldn't be allowed to do alter, create, drop, delete on any database anywhere in the entire MySQL database server, period. So that's how you do that. Alright, so I think that's a bunch of the little tidbits of information here. And I guess in another video we'll do in MySQL, we'll go over more of the different data types, how to do alter tables, joins, things of that nature. Maybe how to back up the database tables. I don't know. We'll see. There's some more stuff you can do with it. There's also stored procedures. You know, there's stuff like that we could throw in there for another video. But for the most part, this covers the majority of SQL. And yeah, feel free to go through this video several times. You might have to, because I kind of went a little fast. I felt like it. But there's the information, and that will get you set up. Cool. Awesome. Well, my name is Nate Nestler, and this is for Hyperactive Studios. Have a nice night.